Hi, my name is Troy Florian. I am the District Wildlife Manager for the Alt District, which is essentially the north half of Weld County, and also includes the Pawnee grasslands. The rest of it would be private. I would say some of the most frequent questions I get is regarding pronghorn hunting, some deer hunting, dove hunting, waterfowl, that sort of thing on a smaller degree. As far as big game, what I preach a lot about is knowing where you're at. We have 193,000 acres of Pawnee, but as compared to some of the general maps where it shows 2 blocks, it's not actually the case at all. It's actually a patchwork of public and private property. Going out in that area, whether you're big game or small game hunting, it's absolutely critical to have some level of a map, like a Pawnee grassland map, or to some degree the electronic apps that are on your phone for mapping to know who owns what. Like I say, it's a patchwork of public and private, and without a map, folks can find themselves traipsing on to private if they're not fully aware. In talking about the maps, there's a few things that come up from year to year. For example, the Pawnee grassland maps or even the Weld County assessor maps will show the public parcels in green. Everything else is in white in terms of private, except for the little purple squares, typically section 16 and 36. Those are owned by State Land Board. What I typically tell folks in regards to those properties is it can run along 2 different tracks, if you will. If the State Land Board leases it out to private entities, then they have to be treated like private property and therefore get access from the folks that lease it or from the land board. If we as an agency lease any of those State Land Board parcels, that's the only time when they're actually called state trust lands. And then you can go into the brochures and figure out which ones are which and where to access and how to get to them. By and large, all of the country up in my world in northern Weld County, there are no state trust lands. It's all privately leased State Land Board parcels. And so I cover units, game management units 87, all of 87, all of 88, the west 4 or 5 miles of 89, the northwest quarter, if you will, of Unit 95, and the north third, roughly, of Unit 951, and then, to a lesser degree, the north third, roughly, of Unit 94. 87 and 88 are predominantly where people will apply for pronghorn, and I'll just start with that. I will say, in terms of access, you've always got part of the Pawnee grasslands to go out on with the hopes to archery, muzzleload, or rifle hunt pronghorn if you draw a tag. And I would say by and large, and I'll even say probably out to about 85%, if folks simply knock on a door to a private landowner, they're going to have fairly high success of getting a yes. I would say more so with does, but it's never, it's rarely a case where people are told no as far as buck pronghorn. Deer is kind of the flip-flop version of that in terms of gaining access. Most of the real deer habitat fall within private land. There are some opportunities on the public side of Pawnee grassland, but it's going to be more so on private. And there's going to be some options to still do the knock and talk and, just knock on a landowner's door and ask for permission. And sometimes you'll find that. Obviously, well in advance and not at the last minute is the best choice there. In terms of small game, I frequently get calls, of course, about coyote hunting, prairie dog hunting, rabbit hunting, that sort of thing, all of which are an option up on the Pawnee. And there's certainly private land options as well, being that the area up there are primarily engaged, especially the landowners, in some kind of an agricultural process. And so doing a knock on the door and meeting folks, once you meet one, next thing you know, a neighbor might have an option to talk to their other neighbor, and then the access network can start that way. I'm trying to think as far as accessing that country. It's pretty much on a grid. There's not too many places that are not connected or only have a few interior parcels where there's a county road on each side. Pronghorn hunting is kind of interesting up in the northern Weld County area. When folks apply, a lot of times what we see is a very busy Saturday and about half the folks on Sunday, and then it turns into a ghost town through Monday and through Friday. I don't know if that's a function of folks just not going out and knocking on private land, but certainly that is a way to help distribute hunters and create plans B through Z, if you will. Those folks that call folks, go out and meet landowners and get access well in advance, usually will have plans B through Z figured out if public land being Plan A doesn't work out. I hear a lot of concern about too many people all at once, and I think that's primarily a function of everybody trying to go out on public land and not researching and partaking in that option to go out and meet the private landowners, which are more than an option, particularly for pronghorn. In this area, it's going to be, if you apply for especially Unit 87, 88, and the eastern parts of 951 and parts of 95, you're kind of out in the middle of nowhere, and so you got to make some preparations, whether it's fuel management, that sort of thing. The kind of the main areas to fuel up is Briggsdale or Sterling, and if you're caught somewhere in between and you're not prepared, you might have to knock on a farmer's door and meet them anyways to help you get back to town. Amenities, there's not going to be a lot of amenities out in that area. So again, pre-planning. I get more questions about pronghorn, so I'll just kind of go a little bit further with that. When you're out in the Pawnee grasslands, there are going to be 2-track roads everywhere out there. And the way to keep yourself, I guess, out of trouble would be follow the basic rule of, if you don't see a numbered sign at the entrance of a 2-track road, then you can't drive it. You can walk anywhere until your heart's content, but keep the vehicles only on the numbered roads and trails. The old maps, the Pawnee maps with the green blocks, if you will, show a pile of trails out there, but a lot of them have been since obliterated, sometimes as a response to resource damage. So the best map to reference in that regard would be the travel access map. It's a free map, but it'll have the most current trails that you can take a vehicle on. And you know, the reality of it is sometimes folks have a better opportunity parking the vehicle and going out in these middle of these sections while everybody else is running around, and you're at times able to intercept the critters that are going in between. There's not a lot of trees, not a lot of fence posts out there, and so prior preparation as far as marksmanship and how far you're comfortable out shooting, it's always a must to bring a rangefinder and a set of shooting sticks, because there's not a lot of options to lean, and sometimes when you're proned out, the vegetation can be just high enough that you're out of reach. And so what I tell people, it depends on the season, but if you do a little research from home, scouting from home, so to speak, on Google Earth, tilt the angle of it, exaggerate the topography a little bit, you can kind of get a read on the topography and where your good spot and stock and travel corridors are to sneak up on a group, because the reality of it is once that first shot is fired, the animals get pretty wary pretty quick, and therefore you got to use the terrain. The other thing you can also look at is the water options. The Pawnee grasslands in general in northern Weld County, most sections out there have some kind of a water function in the form of a windmill or a solar tank. Them are good to pay attention to and know where they're at. It depends on whether there is still water in some of those, just because if the grazing has been rotated out to a different pasture, they might turn them off. There's also playa lakes out there, or ephemeral ponds, the low-lying areas that'll collect drainage water. Those can be good to utilize as a place to hang out if you're more into the sit and wait type of hunt. But that again is all based on seasonal precip, and it's either always dry as a bone, or it rained the night before and you got a puddle everywhere, and now you don't have that limiting factor. I'll kind of switch over to dove, and there's some options as you go out on the Pawnee, but kind of going back to this idea of limited trees in the area. There are some groups of trees out on the Pawnee. There are plenty of opportunities of treed corridors on private land. It's just a matter of knocking on a door. And I would say, don't be afraid. I mean, all they can say is no, right? So, waterfowl hunting, that's going to happen mostly on the area of my district, kind of that southwest quarter. More so just north of Windsor, up through and just a little bit north of Highway 14. And basically from I-25, which is in Larimer County, but as you go east from the Larimer Weld County, out past Alt, maybe 5 or 6 miles. That's the extent of waterfowl hunting in my district. I would say that's probably fairly similar to deer access. There's still those folks out there that are willing to, if you knock on a door and introduce yourself, still the option to get access in that regard. But just know that waterfowl hunting is a very popular sport in those particular areas, and just got to keep knocking on doors or for those options maybe to get into some of the guided hunts if that interests you. So we'll go back to the rabbit side of things, or the other small game. It's going to be limited to those areas that have the sage component. There's not a lot of that. There is some of that, some of the break country, but it's going to depend on whether you're going out on the Pawnee or knocking on a private land. There's certainly some options to go out on the Pawnee and find terrain and areas where you can rabbit hunt, but it's going to be kind of a mixed bag. And so just taking a day and driving around, understanding where the parcels are, what's public, what's not. And then if you, are finding yourself out there and see an area you would sure like to try, you could certainly default to the applications, the mapping applications on the new smartphones, as well as like Weld County Assessor website. You can figure out kind of who owns what and kind of where to start, and if you're still not sure, find a place out there that has that has that house or yard area, and go knock on a door. Somebody that may not own what you're looking at, but they very well could obviously know who their neighbors are, and places that you could go to maybe find people to talk to.